Well, we are back to work on the K-Swap Cefiro build. Back to the fab work. We are in the fab work portion of the build, which is my absolute favorite part of the build. I love fab work. It's just so rewarding and satisfying, and you see the end result. I really enjoy it. So far, we've gotten a good bit done. We built a fan shroud. Got our fan sealed to it, got it sealed to the radiator, built mounts for it to the radiator. We then built radiator mounts to mount it into the car. So they bolt on here to the front, and then they bolt into the frame rail there. So the radiator is mounted in V-mount configuration because we were going to be mounting the intercooler up here. We also got an expansion tank built because we can't fill our radiator from down here. We got to fill it from up here with our expansion tank. Got that all squared away. So we need to mount the intercooler, build the intakes, build the intercooler piping. We still got to do exhaust, but we're not quite finished with the radiator yet, so we're going to start there before we move on to the other stuff. We need to build inlets and outlets. So as you can see, they're just kind of pointed down, and on this radiator, this race radiator, they're threaded. So they're set up to where you could screw a fitting in here and use AN hoses. Now, I don't want to use AN because this is a street car. We need accessibility. We're not going to find like a dash 16 hose on the side of the road somewhere in the middle of nowhere on Drift Week. We need to run just simple off-the-shelf parts. That's the plan, simple radiator hoses. So to do that, we need to build a pretty elaborate hard pipe from here out to get us better towards where we're going to our inlets and outlets, so we don't have to run a super elaborate radiator hose itself. So here's what we've got for hard piping: 30 to 60 degrees, something like that. And then we've got two U-bends, one with a tight centerline radius, one with a wide centerline radius. So between all of this, we should be able to make it work. I believe this is what we need, which is why I got 3 of them. That's about perfect. Obviously, we'd cut it shorter. It'd be probably up about right here. So I want to make these as long as I can, but I also can't go too crazy because then we won't be able to get the radiator in and out with them. So this is our factory thermostat housing. It's oriented just like this. Bolts on where we have our Toge factory deal on here. Now, I've seen a lot of people run that on here and run this in stock configuration. And I think that'll not only make radiator hose plumbing easier, but it gives us a good outlet to run to our expansion tank, or that would be an inlet from the expansion tank. It just opens up our options for water inlets and outlets. So we're gonna modify this a little bit before we toss it back on. All right, another new tool, something I've needed for a long time. Finally got around to getting one, a bead roller. This is one of those tools where I always think about it during a project that needs it, and then I don't get one. Now that I have my own shop, I've finally been getting a bunch of tools that I've needed for a long time. Oh, this is not going well. All right, I'm gonna cut this end off and try again. All right, I got it figured out. I guess it was just for me trying to hold it steady. When I just let it grab it and spin it itself, it worked. Look at that, dude, we rolled. All right, let's get this installed and our other deal installed back on here, and then we can start figuring out our radiator, hard piping and plumbing and all that good stuff. I really need to bring pocket tees back. I love pocket tees. Oh no, you guys are in the way. I'm sorry, I gotta move you. One day you guys will be able to just move yourselves around the shop. I won't just stop what I'm doing. But if you guys are interested in supporting the channel, we got a bunch of merch on the site, and I've got a restock coming because we are pretty low on a lot of stuff, but we got more on the way. All right, I should have just done that in the first place. That makes a lot more sense. Boom. Haha, so when I made these brackets, tacked everything together, went to pull the radiator out, and they wouldn't clear the seam sealer here. Ground them down a little bit, wasn't sure if it'd be enough. It was enough. Look at that, we can pull the radiator with the brackets, which was the whole goal. All right, got the radiator stripped back down because we need to further modify this outlet. So as you can see, it was just like this one, but we had to cut it off to fit in between the frame rails. Now, the pipe diameter we're using is workable. Just got to modify this more to make this fit. We've got to plate this off. We've got to get this ready for this to weld into it so we can start cutting, fitting, and welding it. All right, we've got this fitting. We're gonna cut this a lot shorter. I just did kind of a test, crushed it oval. Got it fitting pretty good. But anyway, we need to put the radiator back in the car so's that we can figure out where we need to cut it and how we need to cut it for both the upper and lower. The upper is gonna be a little bit simpler on the radiator itself and a little more complicated overall. You'll see what I mean when we get there. So anyway, toss these nuts back on, we'll toss it back in. See if we can't get the jamming out on building these outlets. I'm excited about this. This is fun. I love fab work. Have I mentioned that ever before? So happy that these mounts come in and out now. It's a tight squeeze, but they do it. Probably halfway, maybe a little more, and just see where that puts us. I think I want to cut this back a little shorter, not a whole ton, and then we'll figure out where to cut this. All right, so I was going to cut it here, but we've got plenty of room to pull this whole thing out with the long one on. It's not protruding that far past the footprint of the radiator at angle. I don't see any reason to cut it off. The longer it is, the shorter our hose. We've still got a reasonable angle from here to here. So I'm just gonna pull it out and bead roll it and we can put it in and tack it in. But before we do that, we need to move on to this one. All right, so instead of just running this as long as we could and then running one hose over to here under the intake manifold where our inlet is, it would be a pretty long hose. It would have to do like a bend. It would be hard to find a hose that actually fit really well there. So instead, we're gonna run a short hose to this piece from here to here. We're gonna try to get this as straight as possible. And then we'll have another short hose from there to there. So we need to build a pretty elaborate bracket to mount this thing up. All right, this is a cool excuse to use this other attachment on the belt setup. So we have a bunch of different sized rollers that the belt's gonna ride on. We're gonna use 1.5 inches, which is the diameter of our pipe, to cope the bracket to the pipe. Pretty exciting. Got it marked as many different ways as I could. It moved a little bit. Oh, why? Well, it took a few tries to get it tacked right, but we've got it tacked. So we're gonna weld it out and then finish the rest of it, get it mounted back in the car, and move on to the radiator inlets and outlets. That side came out nice. Ow! I got a hole in my glove. And I keep grabbing stuff with it. Idiot. Sorry, you never end up putting rib nuts in a place where it's easy to get a rib nut tool. All right, well, lesson learned, don't buy the cheaper bead roller on eBay. This was still 200 bucks, but it's, you know, a name brand one was like 300, 290, something like that. Oh, I don't use it that much, I'll get the cheap one. Well, one, this thing broke off, the inside die broke off without hardly any force. Two, the pipe with these screws here is either sitting on one screw or the other, especially this size pipe. but the way that die is, it's too far in. It's even too far in for this groove with this all the way in, and then the handle, fully tight, just like falls off. So very, very disappointed in that, especially because it was still 200 bucks. If it was like 60 bucks versus 300 bucks, you know, I would be like, that's what you get. But yeah, anyway, don't buy cheap eBay bead roller. I'll be buying a name brand one, I guess. Being said, we kind of got this pipe bead rolled, I think good enough to get us by the upper, but we did not get the lower bead rolled. So I'm gonna have to throw a weld on that to give us a little bead. So I'll do that real quick. Let's see if we nailed it or not. Yeah, that's about right though. I'm good with it. We'll weld it out. Let's see if the shroud still fits. Yeah. All right, I'm actually gonna switch these Allens to M6 10mm head bolts. Oh no, I dropped it in the freaking thing. I got it. Just so that every piece of hardware on here is the same. The brackets that bolted in, 10 to here, 10, 10. There's no reason to have different hardware. It just looked nicer, but you don't see it anyway. It's a freaking V-mount. All right, let's go install it. Make sure it still fits. And the whole assembly goes in and out. Very satisfying. Oh, look at that, dude. That is freaking sick. I was gonna say satisfying, but I probably said satisfying about 700 times during this build saga. But it's pretty dang satisfying. I gotta admit. Pretty dang satisfying. All right, well, radiator is done and dusted. Inlets, outlets, this little hard pipe here, everything's finished. As far as the radiator is concerned, aside from putting hoses on it, we should be able to get away with straight hoses for everything. I know for sure this one should be fine with a straight. This will be fine with a straight. This one, it depends. We'll have to see. It might need a tiny, tiny bend in it, but hopefully we can do all straight hoses. That way, if we ever have a failure or an issue, we can definitely find a straight hose at any parts store. We don't have to look for some specific molded hose for something else. All we got to do is find a hose with a long enough straight section to replace it. And that was the goal. That was kind of the point of doing this hard pipe here. And overall, so happy with this. This has been so fun. It came out exactly as I hoped. This has just been really fun overall, this build and the fab work aspect of it, because when I built my LS Miata, I learned to fabricate along the way. I didn't really know much about fabricating when I built it originally, and I redid things along the way and revised stuff, and I'm always kind of tinkering with and improving the car and doing fab work there, but I didn't get to like build everything from scratch with the technology that I have now. Whereas with this car, from the very start of the build, we've had more ability to fabricate stuff than we ever had before, so it's just really fun. It's really cool to do all this cool like one-off stuff to make it exactly how I want it to be and serviceable and yada yada. You get the idea. I enjoy fab work a lot. It's just it's so rewarding. It's always so rewarding. So next up is going to be the intercooler. We need to mount it. We need to build the intakes. We need to build the intercooler piping. We need to build a lot of stuff around the intercooler. It is just a bare core. So we need to quit jibber jabbering about it, and we need to get to doing it. Let's get started. All right, now we just need to turn this into aluminum. Look who finally showed up to the party. It's little guy. Where you going, bud? You just got to work. What are you doing? What you think, little guy? How's the project going so far? You good with it? All right. Well, we got our bracket cut and shaped, ready to go. I just kind of built it to match the rest of them. I figured might as well have consistency, even though you can't really see the other ones. I'm gonna mount to these factory studs. So I held it in place and tapped it with a hammer. I left a little tiny mark. Kind of see it, there it is. Little tiny mark for us to drill through. So drill it, mount it, weld it, mop it, twist it, pull it. Let's get back to work. All right, we got this thing in position. We got our bracket bolted up. We got it leveled out, shinned up. It's always tricky tacking stuff, man. Just trying to keep it in position before you weld it, especially something big and heavy like an intercooler. Enough jibber jabber, let's tack it. All right, so one bummer here is I don't have more of this thick rod. So this is really good for almost everything. The thin rod I got thinking it would be easier to deal with, kind of, but the thick rod just works out a lot better because it's easier to be consistent with the dabs. Whereas with the thin rod, you have to put so much rod in, it's harder to put the same amount in each time. So anyway, this is my last little bit of the thick rod, so we're gonna weld it with a thin rod. Definitely a situation where the thick rod would be handy, so hopefully we can still make it look all right. Of course, it's like the front and center weld too, but we're just gonna go for it. I'm not too worried about it. Just would prefer to have the thicker rod, but we'll manage. With any luck, this will be the final time the radiator goes in. I'm not gonna say for sure because stuff always happens, but there's nothing I have planned that would require it coming back out. All right, let's see if it all goes back together. Bolts are lining up. Haha, done and dusted. Intercooler is very firmly affixed. All right, well, that's a wrap on intercooler mounting. Really happy with how it came out. It's mounted in there super solid, really easy to get to the bolts, boom, boom. To pop it right out, no problem at all. Radiator plumbing's done other than the hoses. So yeah, in-tanks, intercooler piping. I mean, there's a handful of things to do. I've got a clever idea for the like turbo inlet and battery situation. We got to do downpipe and exhaust, and wiring. Throttle body should be here soon. There's still a bit to do, but we're cruising right along. I'm really happy with the progress, really happy with how all of this turned out so far. Super excited to start on the intakes and the piping and the quick connect clamps, and we got way more fun stuff to do. This has been a blast. So anyway, it's obviously dark and we're out of time. So I guess that's going to be it for this video. I hope to see you guys for the next one, but for now, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. Goodbye.